I made a video that provided a tier list on every Trustmaster reward and Super Trustmaster reward available from 5-star units during this event. But as a result, I couldn't go over one of the more infamous ones, Pod 153. Now, many of you players, especially those who have just begun, may not have heard about this. It makes sense considering that the NieR Automata collab hasn't graced us for a long time now. Pod 153 is the Trustmaster reward of 9S, a unit from the NieR Automata collaboration. He is a 4-star unit, meaning that he shouldn't be as difficult to get as, say, 2B or A2. On the downside, RNG can still slap you in the face by giving you a macho, shirtless unit instead of the scrawny kid I'm talking about. So what is Pod 153? Pod 153 is an accessory that gives 8 defense and spirit. Nobody cared about that though, even when it first came out. What people did care about were its bonus effects. You see, Pod 153 gave any unit 4 new abilities. One of them is a passive effect, while the other 3 were active ones. The first passive effect, A170 Scanner, boosted the common item drop rate by 100%, making it invaluable for farming. Unfortunately, it doesn't affect any event-featured currency, so you can't use it for farming stuff like that. Even so, it certainly makes it far more convenient to get materials, so that's already a nice point to consider. Now we'll get into the active abilities. A120 Repair can turn any unit into a spare healer. It heals at least 3000 HP split over 3 turns for your team. Furthermore, your unit's spirit won't be a big issue. Though, truthfully, this one isn't a big incentive. The next ability, A060 P-Shield, mitigates physical damage by 40% for 2 turns for all allies. So, is this good? For your information, at this time there are only 3 abilities that surpass this level of physical mitigation. One is Wilhelm's 90% physical mitigation. Now that sounds like it blows this out of the water, and well, it does, but that 90% physical mitigation only lasts 1 turn and it is only applied to himself. Now, Wilhelm is a tank, so it makes sense. But the skill is also on a 4-turn cooldown, so you can't use it whenever you please. The second ability that can surpass the 40% physical mitigation is Golem's Esper Summon, which mitigates physical damage from 50% to 70%, depending on your Golem's rarity. Again, this only lasts for 1 turn, and the Esper isn't normally used every turn. The final ability that surpasses it is Seaside Nico's upgraded Sunblock skill, which can mitigate physical damage from 40% to 50% depending on its level. But he can only apply this level of mitigation to 1 unit. Again, Pod 153's A060 P-Shield lasts for 2 turns and is applied to the entire team. Finally, its last ability, R020 Mirage, deals physical damage that can chain with the Octaslash family. Now, I'm aware that many of you may not use an Octaslash attack. I don't use an Octaslash attack. But what you can do is give a bunch of your support units Pod 153 and let them chain. Of course, their individual attacks won't be powerful, but that's what a finisher is for. If you time it correctly, you can use a finisher to capitalize on that chain and deal outrageous amounts of damage. Keep in mind that when a unit uses it, they will walk to the enemy before beginning the chain, which can potentially mess up Mirage from chaining perfectly. Furthermore, you have to make sure to support your finisher, and make sure they can deal the greatest amount of damage possible. This is accomplished by making use of Elemental Advantage, your enemy species, and using a breaker in the buffer. It's not too different from optimizing your regular chainers, and it may be a good alternative for other players. Furthermore, you can reliably use Pod 153 to make any unit into a chainer during events like Dark Visions or other trials where you can't bring multiples of the same units. This can make any unit into a chainer, though you will need at least 2 Pod 153s to carry out a chain. So, like I said, Pod 153 is an excellent Trustmaster reward due to its versatility and potential. But should you actually chase it? This is, after all, the Trustmaster reward of a limited unit. Now let's discuss that. Beginners may want to get it, but they might not have enough resources to get multiple Trustmaster rewards of 9S. And veterans will probably have other units and equipments that can either surpass or match its chaining capabilities and deal more damage. If I were to compare this Trustmaster reward to something, it would be the Emoji Movie. Now, if you haven't watched it before, the Emoji Movie had a bit of a demographic problem. With bright colors and cute characters, the Emoji Movie was clearly made for young kids. The problem? It's about technology in a way that a person has to be at least a preteen in order to understand and appreciate it. Furthermore, it's too bland for adults, too cutesy and juvenile for teens and preteens, and too confusing for young children. In other words, it's a movie that clashes too much to actually entertain a targeted audience, and the same could be said for Pod 153. While in the past it was hailed, and even praised beyond belief, at this meta level many veteran players could find alternatives instead of using it. Sure, the item drop boost is nice, but it's literally unnecessary to actual gameplay. And the active abilities suffer because you can only cast them once per turn. You don't need the healing ability because most other healers can do other things when they're not healing, like providing resistance or buffing their team. And while the physical mitigation is extremely useful, it suffers because a unit is then forced to use it every other turn if you want to keep it 100% of the time. Thus, you lock out that unit from doing other beneficial things. Finally, while the damage dealing aspect could be incredible, it will ultimately take some practice to utilize it to its fullest potential. And that amount of practice isn't something most players are willing to go through. After all, for all you players out there who pretend to take pride in your game, you're not actually going to go through the effort of practicing if it takes too much effort to do so. And that's perfectly fine. After all, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius is just a game. But that only extends to this realm. The world outside is decidedly real, and the amount of effort that you put in can be directly proportional to the benefits that you get out. It's not a place where you can reach your full potential simply by keeping your head down and following the mundane. It's okay to try new things, work out plans that aren't commonly used. It's fun to spend your time in a lonely tower in a separate dimension, practicing with Pod 153 to get that perfect damage amount. Final Fantasy Brave Exvius does not need certain units or certain equipment. It just needs a basic, well-thought plan. You don't need to chase this Trustmaster reward, but you shouldn't just cast it aside either. Regardless, if you ever find yourself in a position where you have too many resources than you know what to do with, think about getting Pod 153 and giving it a try.